and welcome to the Pig and Whistle Tales from Azeroth. As always, here at the Pig and Whistle Inn in Stormwind, I go for a variety of subjects with regards to World of Warcraft. So grab a bottle or a pint, sit back and enjoy. Today we're going to be going over gear versus skill in World of Warcraft, which sort of has more of an impact and, you know, what's more useful, to be honest with you. We're going to be looking at sort of these two things squaring up against each other in arenas, battlegrounds, mythics, raiding, just casual content, stuff like that. We're going to be looking at if class sort of impacts it as well. But as always, we will get to the weekly events first. So we have the world bosses for this week, which is Aronomonos, Morgeth, and Antros. Again, all of them give, anima, and they all drop conduits, pieces of gear that you might need. So definitely head on over there and make sure that you get them killed this week. Arathi Blizzard is the brawl for this week, so a very thick blizzard. The map is slightly changed in terms of it's all a bit more elevated. There's different pathing through Arathi Basin, and your sight is very, very impaired. You can see probably 30 yards in front of you, not even that, probably more like 20. So, you know, it's a fun little brawl. You can certainly catch a lot of people off guard, but that is the brawl for this week. And the event for this week is World Quest, so you get 50% more rep from completing World Quest if you're looking to do, say, any reputations from previous expansions. That might be useful for you. Or if you're looking to do some reputations for Shadowlands rep, then definitely now is the time to do so, especially if you are human, as human racial gives you more reputation in general. So, gear versus skill. Now, a lot of this, I'm going to be talking about retail mostly in this circumstance, because retail is more refined in terms of what everyone has in terms of abilities. So everyone's got a form of crowd control, everyone's got a form of slow, everyone has maybe a form of like survivability, defensives, etc., etc. So everyone is more on an even playing field when it comes to an MMO. You will never not be on an even playing field at all, because MMOs are just games where the balance of things will never be perfect. It's one of them things that you have to accept when playing an MMO, because you have so many different classes, abilities that you have to fine tune and sort of tweak in order to make these make the balancing changes that are needed. And it's just impossible, you know, balancing 200 plus spells in a video game, all so that they do the same amount of damage, you know, same like effects and stuff like that, but they're also tailored to your class and your immersion for the class. So like a mage casting fireball or something like that, you know, that kind of thing. A warrior wouldn't be casting fireball. Why would a warrior be casting that? One of them things. Instead, he has Mortal Strike, which deals a lot more damage than fireball, but there's a lot of things that you have to take into account. He has to be in melee range to hit him, and you know, it's a lot to take in. It depends on who you're hitting with it, because if you're wearing cloth, you're going to be taking more damage from it. If you're wearing plate, you're going to be taking less damage. So you'll never have that balance in any sort of MMO, whether, you look at, say, like Star Wars, the Old Republic, or World of Warcraft, anything in between, really. So, gear versus skill. Gear matters a lot. That's basically how I'm going to sum that up. It has such an impact in the game right now that if you are under-geared, you essentially handicap yourself massively. Now, this is a bit different compared to, say, Classic, when each of the classes had their own individual styles. So if you were a mage going up against a warrior, you can beat a warrior as a mage completely naked, no gear at all. That's how favourable the matchup is for mages against warriors in PvP. Now, obviously, there are things that warriors can do in PvP, such as use a free action potion or anything like that. But if you're talking just no sort of outside effects in a duel, you have your class versus their class, and you have the tools that can be used by your class, then yeah, Mage will absolutely destroy warriors. And they can do that without gear at all. Now, obviously, gear does scale their damage, so they do more damage, they have better stats, they have more HP and mana, and therefore they can cast more. So you have to play it a bit differently to how you would with gear, but you can do it. If you were to do the same matchup, a warrior versus a mage, in Shadowlands, no doubt about it, that mage is dead before the duel even starts. It's not even a close contest in any circumstance. No matter how skillful you are, if that warrior gets a one hit on you, you're dead easily. So you could put probably some of the best players in the world, with no gear, up against some of the most average people, say, people who've just started into PvP, have some sort of idea on their class, and they would probably lose against them because they can't deal enough damage. They can't survive any sort of damage that the other person outputs. It's very tough to actually win. So in terms of gear versus skill, gear is so important right now in retail that skill will only get you so far. Now, skill only gets you so far as it is. If you were to make a new character, you buy Zereth Mortis pieces. I will quickly go over item level. So, for those who don't know, item level is the level at which your character is in terms of the gear that it's wearing. So, my item level on my druid is 275. If someone is 250 item level, they are substantially less geared than my character. They'll have, say, 8,000 less HP or something like that. This means that they do probably 8% less damage overall and stuff like that. There's a lot of maths to it, but I'm giving sort of a basic breakdown of it. But yeah, if you make a new character, you buy the best gear that you can with Anima right now. So Zereth Mortis piece. At 246 item level or something. If you were to put that on the best players in the world and sent them into an arena to get as high as they can in terms of rating, they would probably hit a brick wall at around 2.1k, I would say, 2,100. Now, this is decent for a lot of people. This is very good for a lot of people. But these are people who would be 1,000, if not, a little bit extra above that rating because of the gear and the skill that they have. Now, I do have to emphasize that skill gets you quite high, but gear won't get you that high. There will be a point where gear would actually get you less rating in a battleground or an arena, than what skill would get you. So if you're ending at 2,100 in some of the worst gear that you can get, that you can purchase right now, or the best gear that you can purchase, then having a fully geared character on a less skillful player would probably end you up around 1,500. Now, this is the last season when all of the ratings were inflated quite a bit. This season, 1,500 is quite decent at the moment, to be honest. It probably translates to about 1,900, maybe 2,000 rating, because inflation hasn't quite happened yet. If you were to be 2,400 rating right now, you'd be in top 100 in in your region. So yeah, inflation needs to kick in very soon, and it will do. But 1,500 last season is probably where gear would get you, and then you start to see where skill and sort of micromanaging your abilities comes in and stuff like that. So there is a lot of or give and take in terms of what gear you can acquire to the certain skill. So obviously, the higher rating that you go, the better gear that you can upgrade it to. So you can push yourself, you can keep pushing. So if you get to 1500, you can get to 1600 to upgrade your gear again. And then you need to go to 1800 to upgrade your gear again. So you're really pushing it. You're really pushing yourself to improve and get better. But gear will only get you so far. You do need the skills to actually push yourself into the game or into like the higher ratings and stuff like that in terms of arena. Now, Battlegrounds can be a lot more different. Individual skill, unlike arenas, doesn't matter as much because you're part of a bigger team. So one person not being able to do their job properly isn't as bad if one person out of 3 isn't doing their job properly, because you really have much more of an impact in that team than you do in, say, a team of 10, etc. So yeah, Battlegrounds, I think gearing is a lot more important rather than skill. I would say arena, skill, and gear are kind of 50-50, but I would say skill is definitely a little bit better. Battlegrounds, I would say gear all the way. Skill obviously does come into it, but if you're not performing at all, you can get carried in a Battleground team, and that is the thing. If I'm talking about rated Battlegrounds, not just the random ones that you join with randomers and stuff like that. Although you can be carried in them, but again, that's just luck of the draw, because obviously if you get people that are geared against, say, people that aren't geared on the other team, then it's kind of unfair. But yeah, gear, I would imagine, is very important in Battlegrounds, mainly because you're a bit tankier and you passively just can output damage. No matter what you're doing, even if you're doing like barely anything, you're still outputting a small bit of damage, healing, crowd control. You're annoying the team in some sort of way and doing some sort of usefulness to the team. And the more gear that you have, the more impact that usefulness is, even if you're not feeling like you're impacting the game, if that makes sense. So I would definitely go with gear for rated Battlegrounds. Mythics, it's a tough one. Gear definitely does come down to it. The more gear you have, the more raw damage that you can output. But I think Mythics comes down to a lot of skill. Skill is very underrated in terms of what abilities that you're using and when. It depends on your APM as well, actions per minute or whatever. So obviously, if you're throwing out 30 spells is very bad for like a minute sort of time. But if you're throwing out 30 spells and someone's throwing out like 55, now obviously the person with 55 is going to be doing more damage. Doesn't matter if they're under-geared by like 20 item levels, they're probably doing the same damage as you. So that's where the gear would come into play. People can take it a bit slower if they are more geared, but if you're more geared, the more comfortable you feel on that class, and you should have a higher skill cap than those who are probably under-geared and are just learning the classes, or like ulting, like using this class as an ult to learn and stuff for mythics, etc. So yeah, it's one of them things. I would say skill is better in mythics. I've walked into mythics like completely under-geared. I walked into a mythic earlier today on my warlock. My warlock is about 240 item level right now. No tier pieces, 2 legendaries, which is good, but anyone can get 2 legendaries nowadays, and it's very easy to do so. Under-geared legend or low item level legendaries, I might add. But I walked in there into like a plus, 10 to 15 keys, and I was outputting about 10k damage, like overall damage throughout the entire dungeon. And to give you some perspective, there's a rogue in there who was combat, who did like blade flurry and stuff. All he like 50% of his damage was blade flurry, and he outgeared me by like probably 25 item levels, and he did the same amount of damage as me. So class can come into it as well, obviously, but it depends how confident you are on that class and how skillful you are in the game, I feel. Because if you have an understanding of the game mechanics of when you want to press massive AoE abilities, when you want to press your cooldowns and stuff, that's where game mechanics and skill sort of, you just know. Gear obviously is just a very much baseline sort of thing. Everyone can get to the same sort of item level, but if you've got someone who is less skillful at the exact same item level, at the exact same class, the person who is skilled would probably out DPS the person by 20-30%. That's the thing. That's the big difference. Gear, again, can have an impact and can be about 20-30% in terms of your damage overall and on single target, AoE, etc. But skill, I think, is what you want to learn or want to pick up rather than gear. You want to focus on the skillful part of your game rather than the gearing part, because that can take you further even after you're geared, whereas gearing can only take you to a certain point. That makes sense. So I would definitely say that skill is better in mythics over gear, but obviously gear is very good. It is very, very good and useful. Looking at raiding now, these things, if you're looking at raiding and you're looking at, say, the Race to World First that ended a week or so ago, just over a week or so, and you look at how geared every single player in that raid was, they were as geared as they possibly could be. They literally couldn't be more geared because they had bought out the auction houses of like bind on equips. They had done multiple runs to get tier set pieces, etc. They did absolutely everything to gear out their like characters. But the skill that is required to win a sort of Race to World First and do mythic raiding, heroic raiding, hell, even if your guild does normal raiding and you're like more casual players, that is still skillful. Like, that is still very skillful. You still have to do the mechanics correctly, like that. So, honestly, skill and gear go hand in hand with raiding, but skill is so important in raiding because of the amount of mechanics that need to be done, the amount of like uptime that you need in terms of on the boss and on like just concentration levels. Just know the game inside out, what you can use here. I mean, they use mechanics or they use abilities in the Race to World First that people forget about. People forget about them, and they do like coordinated sort of not crowd controls, defense uses, and that's what like pro arena players do, and people who play PvP, they rotate their cooldowns because it's the most efficient way of surviving and stuff like that. So you would see one priest drop like the dome or something to reduce damage, and then they would call for the second priest to drop it after that one fades, and then a Death Knight to press anti-magic zone. Everyone crowds in there and stuff. So skill and gear, go hand in hand with raiding. I think they probably spent billions in terms of gearing on the auction house to complete the Race to World First. Now, to put that into perspective, I have played the game for, since Wrath of the Lich King, early Wrath of the Lich King, late Burning Crusade, probably around 2008. Holy shit, that's 14 years ago. That's a long time. Wow, that really is a long time. So, I've played the game for that long. I probably have I usually sit around 200k, because I like to spend some stuff. I like to, keep a bit of gold just in case I need to buy anything on the auction house. But I usually have around 200k as like just pocket sort of change, just in case I lose anything or like I need to just randomly buy shit and stuff like that. Now, the most I've ever had is something like 500 probably, but I spent quite a lot of that. But people spend billions on the auction house in these guilds, mainly just to get consumables, bind on equips. I definitely know in Battle for Azeroth, there was a lot of corrupted gear, and you needed certain corrupted pieces in order for it to be the most efficient at killing bosses. So they would just scan the auction house constantly looking for these pieces. Each one of the like top raiding guilds has their own auction house mount, the Brontosaurus. So they can just check the auction house at any time that they want and stuff like that. And yeah, gearing and skill go massively hand in hand in terms of raiding, but I would say skill definitely takes the cake with this one, because you're constantly dodging mechanics. At the same time, you need as much uptime and damage on the boss as possible so that you don't hit the enrage timer and stuff like that. And it's a lot more knowing what's happening, knowing your surroundings. You're a lot more aware. So that's where the skill comes into it. It's not just get load of gear, do damage, zug, kill. It's very much an intricate part of the game rather than just zug. Is very good. And I like that it is rewarding more skillful players rather than rewarding people who just gear and don't actually have skill. Like, it's one of them things. So, obviously, all of this is my own opinion, but a lot of this stuff does come into, like, it comes down to what class you play. Because obviously each class has a different set of skills and uniqueness to them, in terms of, if you're a warrior and you have awful gear, you're probably going to find it a lot tougher to do well in most content compared to, say, a mage who is undergeared. But when you get geared as a warrior, suddenly the tables turn a little bit and you're like more powerful than the mage in terms of like mythic dungeons potentially and stuff like that. So it all depends on the class, and it depends where your power spike is. Does your power spike come from like gear quite a bit, or does your power spike come from the intricacies of the class? So look at rogue. If you're an undergeared rogue, but you can play the class very well with consistent CC chains, like stun chains and everything like that, you can utilize the CC of a rogue, then suddenly the skill becomes a lot more impactful, because, well, you can keep things locked down for 10, 15 seconds, etc. Whereas a warrior, like I said, skill isn't necessarily as important. There is a lot of skill in warrior, I will say that, with war banner intervenes, knowing when you're in danger, when your team's in danger and stuff like that. But gear for warrior is probably a lot more impactful than gear for a rogue. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still impactful for a rogue, but yeah, rogue can do so much more with less gear than a warrior can, I would say. And it's just one of them things. You'll never have a perfect balance between, if someone's got no gear and someone's got all the gear, then their skill will make up for it. It's very much a balance between, if you're skillful and you have gear, then you're probably going to be one of the better players. If you have no gear and are skillful, you're going to be sort of an average player until you get that gear. If you're well geared but not as skillful, you're going to be very much a meh player, sort of the average player. You're going to be around people who are skillful but have no gear, etc. So there is a sort of metric to it, I guess. But yeah, it's very tough to measure it. But overall, I would probably take skill over gear, mainly because you can always gear your characters. Gearing might take a while, but you can always gear them. Skill takes a lot more time to pick up. You do pick it up eventually, and people pick it up in different ways. But skill will get you to that higher sort of potential that you can reach. Gear only gets you to sort of half of that potential, and then, there's about quadruple the amount of potential that you could get with the skill that you have not learned yet, etc. If that makes any sense. But, we'll just have to see what they do with gearing in the future. They've done all right stuff in 9.2 with the whole Zereth Mortis stuff, the catch-up system with conduits, with Soul Ash. You can build your legendaries a bit easier. You can buy Zereth Mortis gear to sort of catch-up gear, the 2, 4, 6 pieces. They've reduced the amount of honor it costs to upgrade PvP pieces, etc. So they're going about it in the right direction, which is really good, and I applaud them for that. We'll just have to see what happens with the 10.0 announcement and anything in 9.2.5, if they change anything like that. But, Gear's going in a better direction than what it is, because it doesn't take as long to catch up with ults. It's becoming more ult friendly, which is what I think everyone wants in the game. So thank you all very much for listening as always. Now, I do wish to apologize. There should be a monthly podcast out, but I've had to delay it a bit, mainly due to time restrictions that I have on my my podcast hosting site on Buzzsprout. So that will come out next reset next week potentially, but it will be out, and I do apologize for it not being late and not getting the information out there quicker. But thank you all very much for listening. As always, check out all the social medias, Twitch, YouTube, etc. It's all going on. Check out the Patreon if you wish to become a Patreon member. Support the channel even more. Go with Valor, friend.